Okay, welcome to my page. I'm Elise, and this is going to be a series of car talks, movement. I'm going to be talking about spiritual concepts, spiritual and scientific concepts as they relate to creativity, because when I'm in the car, I'm in movement, I typically get a lot of downloads of information. I don't even really drive with the stereo on. I am consistently getting kind of input from the outer world, and I am unpacking it while I'm driving. And that's something that has been very consistent for me for the past few years, and that's because I see the car as a manifestation of self that is the ego, and it's moving very quickly through different parts of the world. It's just moving very quickly energetically. And so today I want to talk about something really fascinating that I just started looking into and that I just found out about. I never had a word for this, but there is a word for it, and it is called synesthesia. And people who experience this phenomenon are called synesthetes. And there's a very easy way to explain it. It's the opposite of anesthesia, which is no senses. Synesthesia is where you're having one sense and a kind of cross. At the same time, in your brain, you're having another sensory perception experience. And a good example is there are some people who perceive colors or perceive words to have colors, or they perceive visuals when they are playing music. And actually, there are a lot of famous people who have given back to the world of creativity, geniuses of their time, and they have this condition. And it's like some people even experience taste for places or names or numbers. And the reason that this is so fascinating to me is that they were showing the way that people experience synesthesia, and I believe that I've taught it to myself. I had some intuitive ability to be able to teach myself this amazing ability to have a neurological response in two parts of the brain at one time through your senses. They call it the sixth sense. And my research today, it reminded me that when I was in my master's program, my teachers told me that I would not graduate on time and that I needed to take a break. I took a break. I went through a spiritual awakening. Directly after that experience, I started doing these Dr. Joe Dispenza meditations. And in the meditation, I would see my future self walking across the stage. And it was only a few months away. And I had not written what is now 60 pages of advanced research. And it was a qualitative study. It was a study on the phenomenological analysis of women with eating disorders. I studied the lived experience of having an eating disorder, and I wanted to know what they all had in common by taking myself as much as I could out of the experience. And the way that I coded for language was something that had never been done before. And I found these connectivities through the stories, through this gift that I believe that I tapped into, because I would picture myself knowing the answer. So it started with, I would visualize myself walking across the stage. I would feel the energy of having done it. And I knew it was December. I was like, I'm graduating. And this was August, late August. And at that point in time, my research group was like, you're not graduating. This is not going to happen in this amount of time. We've never let someone graduate in this amount of time. And you have so much extensive work, and you haven't found the answer to your research. And so then I started picturing myself answering this question, and how I did it was I would visualize myself at the computer writing, I would just picture myself having the feeling of I knew all the answers, and I was just flowing with my computer. Like I knew everything. And something interesting started to happen. Instead of coding for language on an Excel spreadsheet, so I was taking each and every sentence, the words, the codes that people were using to represent their reality, and I was separating them by each and every individual word. So taking the sentence and breaking it down to only the words, and then finding if there were similar words that made connections throughout the other experiences. And that's what coding really does. And so my ability to code was because of this gift. Now, they say that you can't teach yourself this, that people are born with this gift and they can't forget it. It's like they see an A is yellow, and A is always yellow, and it's never not going to be yellow. I believe that I taught myself this experience, and that we can teach ourselves this experience, because what I was able to do is I had this download during the day that I was supposed to take the words and start putting them in word clouds. You know, online you see those word clouds, and the ones that were used the most often, they become the largest ones. So then I could see patterns in the visual representation of the words, and then I was separating myself from the word representation and really going with the energetic representation of what the word was. But it gets even deeper, and I have like literally words clouds and words clouds. There's photos of me even doing this in my office, because people are like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm coding, you know, for language, but I'm using a visual representation because that's how I best understood it. But when I started to see the patterns, I started to color them, and then I was able to make connections through the colors that I would see in the patterns. So for instance, if I found a theme and everything within that theme was a color. So if somebody was talking about a person, then that was pink. And if people were talking about thoughts, then that was yellow. And it was blue, I think. Yeah. So I made these word clouds that were a visual representation of how often this energy and code was present within the language across all these interviews. And then I found a way to use a visual representation that I could understand, which was color. And it allowed me to make connections so much faster than anybody had done before. So then from that point, I was able to say, you know, this is there is common themes within this phenomenon, and this is what they are. And then I made the connections, and I was able to the best of my ability, which I also talk about in my research, take myself out of the research, because I was writing a phenomenological analysis of the lived experience of having an eating disorder from the perspective of someone who had an eating disorder. So I wasn't able to be fully objective, like looking from the outside. It was still part of my experience, but I felt that was very needed within the field of research of eating disorders. And I also had this want to separate myself and look from the top, like what's really going on? How do I experience an eating disorder? How do we experience an eating disorder? And my research, what it stated was, you know, after a traumatic experience, there is a false self, a false identity that comes in the place of, you know, the authentic expression of someone. So this false identity has low self-esteem, and that's across any eating disorder. Further, that groups, and this is how I found the stuff, the information came through the way that I coded, group behavior and group think had a direct impact on the way that an individual related to their world, and whether or not they engaged in eating disordered behaviors based on that identity that was shared within the group, the group's values, the group's, and those were, I had to find those through this experience of what is the group that people are self-identifying, and how do I make connections between their behaviors and the group when they're not directly making those connections. And the reason that I find this so fascinating is that I was able to take really complex data. It was years of my research at this point that I had to make connections that I had not made before. I was able to take complex data and make connections using visual representation that was coded by my visual representation. So the way that I could see the word, whether it was big or whether it was small, whatever color it had, the association that I had with the color, and how the colors were, it was a phenomenon in itself, how they were all intermingling. And now what's so fascinating is the way that I understand eating disorders after I went through that spiritual awakening is this false self, the ed is what we call it. There's a book by Jenny Schaefer, and she talks about breaking up with ed. And there is a personality almost that exists in the mind of repeated, you have a thought, and then you have that emotional response, and then you have the behavior, and then that's a personality. And so it becomes someone's personality, ed. And to come back to their self, their true self, their authentic expression, you have to start using language to separate it. That's the first step. If somebody says, I am anorexic, are you? Because I am is your being. And your being is actually consciousness experiencing itself. And so to say, I am anorexic, you are putting your power and your thoughts and your behaviors in that category of how you explain yourself and how you self-identify. The first step to creating a separation would be to say, I struggle with eating disordered patterns or distorted views of food, or I use food to cope with my emotions. And even this linguistic just separation causes spelling to go out into the universe as you stop self-identifying with the thing that is not you, and then start to develop a relationship with your authentic self and the way that consciousness wants to express through you. And so I find this to just be super fascinating because I didn't know that there was a word for what I was doing, and I do it in my art consistently now, and it's actually the opposite. So I use colors to actually explain concepts that are advanced, and one of the things that I teach people to do is through color, is through the chakras, to learn the chakra colors, and then to learn how to decode an expression using those colors and using that complex information. Now, they say that somebody who has this disorder or this, I believe it's a gift, they wouldn't ever know not having it. They've always had it, and they have very advanced memory and cross connections in their brain that other people do not have. And they're able to perceive information quickly, they're able to memorize information quickly, and they perceive things, what I would say is multidimensional, through multiple ways of being at one time. And so what's fascinating to me now is that, they say that you can't teach someone this, but I seem to have taught myself this. And also, further, I feel that they said that one of the commonalities is typically people who have this, they have more white matter in their brain, which is fascinating for me too, because I have early onset white matter disease, which is a lot of white matter in my brain that other people don't have, and some other abnormalities, one of them being white matter in my brain. And I'm not sure if it comes from when I almost died when I was very young and my brain was swelling, and it caused those areas of my brain not to make connection anymore. But they also say that this synesthesia? Yeah, synesthesia. They say that, I just got so distracted. They say, I was going to say the white matter thing, it's 70% more likely in people who are artists. That's fascinating to me as well. Because people who are very innovative and very creative, they see things differently than other people. And what is the chances, possibility, it's endless, it's infinite actually, that we are all perceiving the world in a different way through a multi-sensory experience that we're just now starting to explain, these concepts with science. So I have just now discovered this. I didn't have any idea that there was a name to what I had been experiencing, and I do feel that there is a way to train your brain with neuroplasticity to do this continually, because I've done it and I know that it's possible. And then that opens up the world of like, how many other people are experiencing such complex ways of being that continue to evolve and expand, because they say, you know, that people are born with this. It's a genetic abnormality. And, you know, they actually don't know that there is another way of perceiving, right? Because they could never perceive a different way. But I feel that I really learned how to perceive a different way, and how to expand, and how to create new neuroplasticity and new connections in my brain, and cross connections in my brain that show consistency now. And so it's fascinating to me, because as a creative and as people who you know, have different brain abnormalities, I really haven't thought about that as being, you know, I know that I have a, you know, early onset white matter disease, and I've been told that, but I didn't know that there was any gift in it. And it's funny that we find these gifts in our disorders. And I'll say the same thing for having an eating disorder. There are immense gifts that come from even what other people would perceive as something that is just harmful, or not maladaptive in that way. For example, ADHD. I am diagnosed with ADHD, and I believe that it comes from stemming from when we're a child, and in the very, very early years of our life, we are unable to leave a situation, and we're trying to create a sense of, you know, safety within ourselves. And so instead of leaving the situation, we leave with our minds. We learn to use our mind to distract from whatever it is that's happening. And then we go to public school, and in public school, there's no ability to get up, or limited ability to get up. And so you're sitting there and just constantly finding ways to distract your mind, because you've learned this as a way to cope. And so some people see ADHD as something that really hurts them, you know, like they have ADHD and they're unable to focus on particular tasks. But I find that ADHD for me causes this ability for me to be extremely focused on things that I am the most oriented towards and most resonant with. And in that, I'm able to go really deep into concepts that, you know, tie and weave together. So though some people may say, you know, work on this and only do that. And I believe that my quality of life is different because I allow myself the opportunity to explore different ways of expressing myself. For example, I have gotten a lot of feedback in my life about, you know, how I should creatively express myself and to focus on one thing. And I think that comes from a productivity mindset of the masculine energy of doing and success. And I actually don't know if success is a very masculine trait, but it's a patriarchal idea, I feel, that comes from doing and having what you have created to bring you a level of productivity, rather than experiencing it just because you want to experience it and it makes you really happy. And so in that sense, you're just doing it because you're experiencing a better quality of life. So I just wanted to dive into this, because if there's someone out there who has found a way to teach themselves these abilities, send me a message, comment below. I don't know, I right now I am going on a deep dive into my research, my past research, and what I'm noticing is that the more that I'm going into my research that I spent years on, and also bridging my spiritual self with what I perceive as, you know, just my ego, or these different experiences that I've had, what I'm experiencing is this way of scientifically explaining spiritual concepts. And this is not to say that there isn't a intuitive ability that is just, you know, unexplainable, but it is to say that like the false sense of self that I found in my phenomenological analysis. I believe that is leaving. Now what I understand of the spiritual world is that the disordered patterns cause you to abandon your authentic truth and your divinity, and that for me is a very spiritual thing. So what I'm finding is that there is a lot of science out there to explain things, especially when you think about it from not just theoretical concepts, but the way that we're looking at the brain now, and just exploring like different ways of what I perceive as multidimensional being. It is these senses and abilities that people have, and I have a number of abilities. It's not even just this one. I've had a lot of them that I've been experiencing recently. My newest one is a sensation in my body that gives me a clear answer to things. And so these abilities, I feel, are just continuing to grow the more that I have these conversations, and the more that I cultivate a space for us to have these conversations. And, you know, maybe if you're out there and you're thinking, that is fascinating, I wonder if I could teach myself to do this. And like, let's figure it out, because maybe it's because I have white matter, maybe it's because I did these meditations and I was gifted this ability, and then focused attention over time caused new neural pathways in my brain, because I was solving these amazing complex themes, and now I'm able to see the world in a different way. And I think that's how we expand our mind, create new connections, and then expand our consciousness, the way that we perceive the world, and then continue to evolve together from a place of seeing one another. And how do you perceive reality, and how do I perceive reality, and how does science say that? And because, you know, science is like a lot of perceived realities, the way that because science starts with a question. It's the research question is the why, and then you bring in all of the information, which typically comes from multiple lenses of different people, and then you continue to ask the question. So I think science and spirituality right now specifically are fascinating to me, and I would love to continue having these conversations with just recording myself in the car. And if anyone finds this to be helpful, comment below, because I'm just putting it out there to see if anybody else has experienced this. So I look forward to connecting with other people who have experienced this synesthesia or synesthetes. I think that's how you say it. I don't know, but look it up. It's fascinating. I will connect with you all soon. One other thing I want to say is that this possibility to teach yourself these gifts is something that I'm fascinated with, because a lot of people see that they call it a disorder, they call it a brain disorder, but is it really, or is it a gift? And that's something I want to have open this conversation about, because there are so many things that people see as different than them. And if you are divergent, neurodivergent, people see that commonly as a trait that is maladaptive. You know, it's not helpful. And I think that's because we live in a world where the thoughts and behaviors and traits that we have are based on a system that wants us to be productive and to live in a world of institutions, and the institutions that have had power, they look a certain way. And another fascinating thing that I found was that most babies are actually born with this ability, and it's actually something that we all have the ability to do, and that over time we actually lose this ability, which I find to be really, really awesome, because it means that there is a teaching that takes place that creates neural pathways that go one direction repeatedly over time, and that these neural pathways take away our ability to create new neural pathways because we've done them so much. But what I am exploring is that truth, or can we teach ourselves these abilities? And gifts and go back to that, infants have a way of this cross neuron firing in their brain. For instance, when they hear a noise, they may also see it visually, or they may see something visually and then hear a noise, but they're making sense of their world based on the way that there is this collective perception that is happening. And so maybe somebody saw these colors associated with numbers when they were a child, but then they lost that over time through neural pathways. So what I would love to have a discussion about is, what is the availability that we have to go back to a place where we have more neural receptivity than we currently have? Because that's what I'm exploring in my own life, is the ability to expand my consciousness, expand my awareness, expand these new neural pathways in my brain. And they also say that hallucinogenics can bring these properties, this synesthesia or synesthesia-like experiences into the neurochemistry while you are on them, for example, LSD. And so why wouldn't we be able to, the thing that would be stopping us would be conditioning. So can we condition our brains to have these different ways of perceiving that can be permanent and that can continue, and that we can continue to grow a deep relationship with, so that it becomes more immediate? Because we have these thoughts that almost seem immediate, but they come from our mind, and we're the ones who created that. And over time we went to that neural pathway, so that's what makes that memory very consistent and quick. So yeah, that's just another thing I wanted to add, is that I think there is an availability to tap into these states of being because they are available to us, and seeing them as a gift and not a disorder. And I think that we live in a world where people are commonly saying that things are a disorder when really they're just different. Disorder, maybe, I don't even know what the root of those words are. Well, I do, but what if that is an order? What if that is an adaptive gift, not a maladaptive? Like I gave the example of ADHD. So comment below if you're fascinated by this, if you've had this experience. What do you believe? Can we teach ourselves these gifts and make them so that our brain is actually going to these places on a consistent basis?